Yep. 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 Oh, wait. Real hard. Thank you. Yep. One more. One more. Yeah. Yep. Yep. One more should have it. Thank you. One more. All right. So like mini holes, I've got a fat side. I'm definitely going to try and preference my heat to this fat side, which is really easy in a coal forge. I can just put that fat side down. I could quench the skinny side. I personally don't feel like I'm fast enough to quench the skinny side and get a good heat for drifting a hole. So I just try to do the best with heating the fat side. One more. One more. We have a 4.5-inch natural gas supply line with 19 inches of water column. So it was kind of a no-brainer.
So is it a Big Johnson or something?
No, it's called a Mankle forge. We'll see how we like it. But I'm excited to have a forge down at school.
Propane puts out more BTUs.
Does it?
Yeah, by far.
But the other thing was, like, with the natural gas, we just turn a valve and we have it. Propane, we have to order tanks. I think was another big reason.
That route, and she had to get a compressor to create enough pressure to run the forge.
Did you want, really quick, sort of like a...
One more. Let's do one more. Okay. Good heavy one. It's almost. Okay. One more hit. So there, our slug popped out.
What did you just sprinkle on it?
That was some coal dust. It was to help and try to release the punch. I think with this punch, part of the issue is it's very parallel sided on the punch, so it doesn't It helps if you have a little more taper to your punch, because then as you drive it in, your hole is wider. It's easier to release the taper coming up than something parallel sided. But there's just a hole punched from one side. At CMA was the first place where I saw punching a hole and driving out the slug without going over a party hole or a pritchel hole. It's easier to do in heavier bars. You have more room. That if you punch to the center, when you drive that slug out, it actually shears out, and there's still bar underneath it that it acts like its own hardy hole or own pritchel hole, basically. And that was one of the bigger reasons I was wanting to find 3/4 by 1, was that you can do that a lot easier, and just you don't need to go over the pritchel hole. So I'm drifting this drifts like right under a 1/2 inch. It'll give us some clearance for the tensioning bar.
So on this, your example over here, it looks like there's maybe a brass sleeve in the hole, or?
Yeah, there's I think it's a copper sleeve in that hole and brass sleeves on the center holes. That was just kind of a finishing touch we did to the piece. Not today.
Home detail.
Yeah.
Just tubing is what this started out as?
Yep, just started out as a piece of tubing for both of those. What's really important is to make sure that you anneal the piece of tube before you put it in, and that you start flaring the tube, and then you take at least one more annealing heat before you do your finish, because we flared those until they were all the way flat. If you don't, you really run the risk of splitting the rivet. It's worth the extra 5 seconds it takes to anneal it. And on tube rivets like that, it's really helpful to do a test piece to find how much of a flange you want to stick out and cover over the piece of plate to get the look you want. And it's also very, very helpful to have a second set of hands when you're just trying to balance all these parts and have the same amount of rivet sticking out on both sides. Or you could figure out some fancy jigging and spacers or stuff. Alright, so this last hole, we're going to do the top hole at 21 3/8 inches up from the heel or the foot of the leg.
Is that long enough?
One more. Yep. One more. So there's our slug. Stop. Yep. Ooh. Go ahead and knock that out. don't know if we need to go any further than that. Lighter. One more. One more. Really light. Okay. Garrett, you gonna strike?
I was like, what are you doing?
Pointing this one. I'll get a heat. Stop there. So we're starting to form. You can see I was a little off in my angle. The peak is not going to be running down the exact center of the foot. And when I say Florida, I mean Florida, New York, not Florida, the state. Which for a small town, Florida, New York had an awesome food selection. They had a really good Mexican restaurant there. And a really good Polish deli. So the Mexican restaurant was in the back of this tiny little Mexican grocery, and it was one lady. She ran the whole thing by herself. She was the cook. She was the cashier. She ran the grocery store. And, I mean, we'd walk in and she said, "Oh, I make you guac and chips right now." And they'd come out still steaming from being fried. It was awesome. And that was during the workshop for the collaborative sculpture forging. We went there and had lunch one day, and about all came back to the workshop, and we were dragging. We had way too much food to eat for lunch. Okay. I'm gonna go with that for now, but that's kind of our peak triangular ridge. I like this side a lot better. It's a what?
Club foot.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a club foot. I like how on that right side, just the way it tapers into the point and meets the point as the triangular peak comes down. As James was asking, is the Hardy tapered? No, the Hardy is just a straight V swage. If it was, there were times where there might have been 3 or 4 guys working with me, and some of the other groups had 6 or 7. It depended more on the size of the piece they were working than anything. That's getting there. All right. I'm gonna. Where? Oh, it's a 2x4 to end an internship. I liked it a lot. Garrett, where's? Oh,
Do you want
can
to
you hold this?
get that?
I kind of want it flatter, but I also don't feel like bothering with it.
So you're gonna have this whole.
Go like this, and then I'm just gonna have you strike down on it.
All right.
I'm gonna get a bigger heat though. There we
That
go.
worked pretty well.
That worked a lot better.
I would measure to this tip here.
Yeah, I can't measure there as much, but let's go a little. Yep. One more. Hold on. Too far. Okay. We're gonna live with that.
Lines to come up.
Hold on.
Huh? You will have fun.
Yep.
You didn't do it yet. I haven't done it yet. But I want to do is instead
Yep.
of being like this here, I want to do it. One
Yep.
diamond.
Yeah.
And the other one on the floor.
Yep. There we go. One last one. One more. One more. Good, knock that out. Last one. No. I think actually part of it is that anvil's lower. I like the height of this anvil better. That one's going to be moved back up to this height. Because even though it's slightly nicer to have the lower height for working with the striker, you can still work at the higher height, and I spend at least 80% of the time I'm working in here by myself, so I want to be able to use the big anvil higher. What?
The striker gets
Yeah.
Yeah.
the stick expands and the hole on the stick, it just comes right down.
The cat deliver beer too.
Now you get to read. New York water comes out of the mountains of North.
Yeah.
And consumer reports did a bottled water taste test, and as a baseline, they included New York City water, and New York City water came out right on top on taste. I've heard it's like really good. Yeah. It comes out perfect
Dang it.
when it reaches its max height.
Stop. One more. Stop. Alright.
Well, there's a Wendy's, there's a Freddy's Burger.
Light. One more light one. Real light.
Can you hold that up for a second?
Yeah. The thickness of the material we're going through, plus I think it's 3/4 of an inch for the head of the rivet. And then I'm going to head it underneath the power hammer, and these are just going to be a simple flat-headed rivet. I've already cut my bars to length, so that'll have 3/4 of an inch for each head, plus the 3/4 of an inch of material that we'll go through from the leg and the plate. And I'm going to, I've heated the rivet. I'm going to cool off the bottom half that's going inside the rivet header. I'm going to get a little bit hotter heat up on the top. When we were making a big run for a railing, we'd put a kiss block in the hammer so that we'd get the exact same thickness of rivet head every single time. I'm making 6 rivets. I'm not going to bother with the kiss block.
Drill that out.
Yeah, before I put the handle on here, I just chucked the bar up in a lathe and drilled it and bored it out in the lathe. And at school, ideally I would have gone just slightly over 3/4 of an inch, but at school we didn't have any bits or boring bars that were quite right, so I just went, not boring bars, reamer. Thank you, that was the word I was looking for. All right, so pretty simple. Drop in the rivet.
Can we remove this?
Yeah, I don't need any of that up there.
Pull up this.
And then I'm just gonna let it cool down a little bit. That, I'm happy with that head. The other thing is my saw, I struggle with getting perfectly square cuts. So there's a bit of a slant on the end of the bar, and that's gonna lead to an offset of the head of the rivet. You'll be able to see on one of these rivets. Then I'll just bring it over and knock it out. And I've got the bottom of an oxygen can down here that I caught all my rivets in. So there's,
One of them hot.
yeah, one of them's hot in there. It's one of these ones.
Just keep grabbing them until you find the right one.
This one? Yep. Okay.
Close their eyes and then that.
One. The other thing I forgot to do was test to see if I could get a hot rivet through one of these holes. Because there's two ways we can do these rivets. We can put them all through cold. We can put the rivet through cold, just torch the top and head the rivet, and for this application that'll be okay, that we don't have the rivet swelling to fill the holes. Or we can heat all the rivets in the forge, put them through hot, and head the rivets. So we'll see if I can get a hot rivet to fit through.
Yeah.
Is that a square rivet?
What?
Is that a square rivet in the forge?
Oh, no.
Well, we'll call it quits for part 2 here, and we will pick up with part 3, and Stuart will complete the work stand in part 3 and get it fully assembled and ready to use. So head out to the shop, make something, stay safe, wear your safety glasses, and we'll see you for part 3.